scale exactly the way that we expect. So it just takes just a little bit of trial and error in order to figure out what needs to change with those. Other than that, we haven't noticed anything.
When you say they don't scale linearly, typically do you need less per litre as you go up in size or more?
Yeah, we need more, and the reason is that the surface area to volume ratio, because the tank, when you use herbs and spices and hops and things like that, they tend to settle on the bottom of the tank. And so a tank that's twice of the volume may only have 1.5 times the surface area on the bottom. So you actually need to use more spices, more herbs, more hops as you scale up the volume, because they're just settling out on the bottom of the tank, and so you're not getting as much utilization out of those materials. So it's just a bit of trial and error to figure out how much we need to adjust for the lower utilization that we see. We've also we do some agitation with some of the batches too, so we'll try to
that was going to be my next question.
To pump up and recirculate it a little bit or do something like that to try to move it, and that offsets that somewhat, but it still doesn't completely offset the difference. And that's something that talking with my brewer friends, they run into that, especially with hops and IPAs. It's very difficult to get the same batch in a tank twice the size is very difficult, especially with dry hopping, to get it to match.
And so I assume that a stir plate or something like that's sort of out of the question.
It's 1,600 gallon tank. That would be a big stir plate.
It would be, but I do industrial things. It'd be a big motor, but it'll do. But yeah, I assume there's other limitations that will make that not really possible. What about have you considered putting a pump in or anything like that to circulate inside the tank?
Well, the pumps that we have, we'll just connect it up to the racking item, and we can recirculate it that way. So we do that for some of our batches, depending on what we're making.
Yeah.
We'll do that. The trade-off of that is that you're stirring everything up. So if you're trying to let it all settle out so that you can get a clear rack, you have to allow some time for it all to settle back down. So so that becomes a thing.
So, taking it for a moment back to the home side of things, what would you recommend for somebody who's just wanting to start trying sessions? What should they start out with?
I think pick your favorite fruit and start with take a traditional mead that you like and just ferment it dry, and then add some. Stabilize it, and then just chuck a bunch of fruit in, and then just do some bench trials and decide how sweet you like it. Just back sweeten it to where it tastes right to you. That's what I would do. That's not what we do now. But if you're getting started, it's a very simplistic, easy way to do it. And you can also make a 5-gallon batch of a traditional that we refer to as a base mead, and then you can just you can chuck in spices, or you can split it out into some 1-gallon batches and try different things and decide what you'd like. We found our fruit meads are extremely popular with the general crowd. I can give any of our fruit meads to someone who's not normally a mead drinker, and usually they will want to come back and get another one. So that's a good place to start.
When you back sweeten or you fruit sweeten, so to speak, do you find that a higher gravity is more difficult to carbonate than something that's lower? Will 1005 carbonate easier than 1015?
The carbonation is definitely a little bit more challenging. The higher the gravity, if you're trying to carbonate it consistently, it is more difficult to carbonate it the more residual sugar that you have. So that is a good point. But at 1025, 1030, it does take on a home scale anyway. It takes my stuff about twice as long to carbonate. So, but where the carb's done in the commercial system, it doesn't really seem to be in effect. There must be some chemistry that I don't understand going on there with surface tension or something.
Mm-hmm. For the home listeners, if we want to bottle from a keg, do we need to have a beer gun or no?
I have a beer gun. I have a beer gun, and I don't even know where it is. When I want to bottle something, I take a picnic tap and I fill the bottle up all the way to the top, and then kind of violently shake it from side to side to splash some of the mead out to leave a little headspace, and then cap it real fast.
I see.
And I've used that method for the last 2 years that I entered homebrew competitions, and I won more medals with that than I did with the beer gun. So,
okay.
For what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
For those that are out there going,
to be
how do I win a medal? Yeah. You were saying earlier, it just ferment it out dry and then back sweeten with fruit, whatever your favorite fruit is. Mm-hmm. But what yeast would you recommend that somebody who's just starting with sessions start out with? You guys have used a whole range of yeast, so let's narrow that down.
We absolutely
start out with.
We absolutely have, but man, I gotta take a cue from my friend Matt Crispin and from Michael Fairbrother both, and say 71B, because if you're a relatively new mead maker, that yeast is going to be, it's really easy to work with, and it's not overly, it's not like the champagne strains where it tends to like blow through sorbate and sulfites and still continue to ferment at 35 degrees in your refrigerator. Not that I've ever had that happen with EC 1118 or
just
DB10.
A friend, right? Wasn't you, it was somebody else. Yeah,
I heard it from a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. That yeast is extremely user friendly, so I love it, and we still use it. We use it for a lot of batches. Actually, we have a batch that's fermenting right now with it at the meadery. So, so definitely that one, or D47 is a good choice as well. I've been always felt like it's also fairly easy, but D47 I would avoid unless you have a really good temperature control, because it can get a little fusily if it gets too warm. It likes it cold. We use it at 55 degrees, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not going to use it anymore because I just cannot get there. I don't have jacketed fermenters, so yeah, that ain't happening. David Webb is asking, what made you switch from DV10?
So we switched from using DB10 because it's just too difficult to get it to stop and not re-ferment. So we just had issues with it wanting to continue to ferment, and we had a batch that dropped 10 gravity points in the course of less than a week at 35 degrees. It was like on a second racking. It was unbelievable. That yeast just does not want to stop. So, but we love it for our trads because it's such a clean yeast, and it just contributes absolutely no character at all. I call it the lager strain of the wine yeast, and so we love it for traditionals because it just doesn't get in the way of the honey at all.
You don't find that it makes it a little bit of an acidic piece there in the final profile?
I haven't noticed that myself, but that may also be just due to our process.
Right.
Yeah, David is saying he uses it in his dry sessions. So for the noobs out there who are just starting with session meads, the idea is to use a good, solid, reliable, steady yeast. but you're wanting to, and again, I'm taking this down to the entry level thing for people who are just getting started with sessions.
Yeah.
Less honey. They're starting with less honey. Run this through a calculator, guys. So go to, Mead Makers or Got Mead Calculator and run it in there. And so that way it's going to go dry. You're going to stabilize. Then you're going to back add your fruit to get your flavor, to get your extra sweetness or whatever it is. And that's how you make a session. Did I get that right?
Exactly, and that's our methodology, and it's very reliable. And you can start depending on how much alcohol you want, somewhere between 1.050 and 1.060. That'll ferment out to between 6 and 8% alcohol, and then by the time you stabilize and back sweeten it, then the alcohol drops off by about 0.5% to 1% as you add stuff to it.
But to clarify, are you saying that you're suggesting to people that are just starting out to do this to make a trad first, and then once they stabilize it to add fruit, or are you saying that you should also add fruit up front, ferment it dry, stabilize it, and then add more fruit on the backside?
You could certainly do either way. I'm sort of the mindset. I tend to like fruit in secondary. This is always a fun one at the mead panel at HomebrewCon, because everybody gets on their soapbox about this one. But that's just the way that I prefer to do it. I like fruit in secondary. I like the character that you get from it.
Yep.
Other mead makers never add fruit in secondary.
I add fruit in primary and secondary, so I'm one of those. Let's just go all the way, people. Just both of them, and you get the, because I like uber fruit in my melomels. So, but yeah, I had to drag you onto the mead panel at the MMA conference. That should be interesting.
There we go. We'll duke it out.
Yeah, it would be interesting. But it's just because there's a lot of interest in sessions. Everybody's talking about them, and there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So we want to try to lay some ground rules, so to speak, not rules per se, but some ground guidelines, if you will, to help people so that they can get there. I'm going to do a bunch of tea-based sessions this winter. And so I'm kind of exploring this as well, because I've always done full bore, 11 to 14% meads. I've never done a session, never bothered to try. So this is new for me.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Yeah, I'm looking. AJ's saying I'm going to drive everybody onto my panels. There's going to be like 30 people on the panel. For those of you who are wondering what the hell I'm talking about, we're talking about doing a breakout session panel discussion at the MMA Mead Conference, and I'm trying to decide what it's going to look like. So there's probably going to be one. I just don't know exactly what it's going to be about. Probably just mead best practices. Just kind of keeping it general this year and see how that works. But yeah. So yeah, this is new for me, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to Lowe's. They got a whole pile of 2-gallon pails. I'm going to buy a whole bunch of 2-gallon pails, and I'm just going to take all these different weird fruity teas that I bought over the last year or so from T-Von and a couple of local tea shops, and I'm going to fling them all in there and see what I can make. I'm going to just, each bucket's going to have a different setup, and it's just I'm probably going to do it all with the same yeast, and then just throw the teas in there and see what happens. And probably use orange blossom as a base, because I don't want to use my specialty. I've got a foxglove, and I've got meadow foam, and I've got an entire gallon of honey that I got at St. Ambrose, and Star Thistle, and those are gonna be for something special, because they're nice varietals that shouldn't be covered up with a whole lot of other stuff. So, but I'm looking at doing some really interesting stuff, and I'm going to focus on doing sessions and fast ferments. So 2 to 3 week ferments, 4 week ferments, and then turn it right around.
You're going to make up the tea in advance, yeah?
Yeah, I'm gonna be putting them in. They won't be tea suspended. I'm going to take the tea and make tea, and then I'm going to add the tea in place of some of the water, and then be monitoring it throughout, and then if necessary add more tea on the back end with any necessary back sweetening that needs to happen. And It's possible I may bring in the varietal honeys at that point. I haven't decided yet. It just depends on what the flavor profile looks like.